video has the best Fortnite settings for all Nintendo Switch players. Whether you want fast builds and edits or the best aim possible, these settings will help you out. And the controller that I'm using right here is called the NYXI Flexi, who's quickly sponsoring this part of the video to show that at the same cost of a standard controller, you can get pro features, including 4 back paddles, which is huge for being good at the game. It has Hall effect joysticks that are almost impossible to get stick drift on, a back textured grip, clicky tactile face buttons that you can actually swap around to match the platform you play, and 2 super unique features that you don't see a lot. These are the front legs that have a sort of breathable grip look, but RGB shines through these holes, and you can set this controller up as an Xbox layout or pop this out for a PlayStation layout. Having used this thing on both PC and Switch, I can say its precision and overall feel is pretty nice. And with the Hall effect triggers and Hall effect sticks, this thing should be pretty durable. NYXI has a whole lineup of gaming tech and accessories, and you can check all of those out with the link in the top of the description and pinned comment. So thanks to NYXI, and now let's get into these. Starting with the video tab, which I feel like Switch and just consoles in general are always really dark. So to combat that, I go 150% brightness, and even if on 150 you feel like your game is still too dark, you can come over to colorblind mode, change it to Tritanope, and change the colorblind strength all the way up here to 10. This right here is the brightest you could possibly make your game on Switch, and you know what, for this video I'll rock with it. For the advanced graphics, there's only 2 settings here, but really the only one you need to mess with is make sure power saving mode is turned on. One tab over from that is the audio, and I feel like Nintendo Switch audio probably isn't the best, so definitely make sure to have your volumes all at 100% and visualize sound effects turned on. This literally shows you where every single shot comes from every player on the map. It lets you see footsteps that you can't even hear yet. This setting alone helps your awareness so much. Licensed audio you'll want turned on. I just have mine muted because I make YouTube videos and they'll copyright me if I have it on. One tab over from that is the communications tab, which you can do whatever you want with. And then one more tab is the game section, which this tab is almost just as important as the sensitivity. The first section here is the movement settings, which the only 2 that I make sure I change are toggle sprint turned on and auto open doors turned on. The rest of these I just leave on default until we come down to the combat settings, which over here, hold to swap pickup is definitely useful, and auto pick up weapons, I'm actually gonna turn this on. Now it will get kind of annoying accidentally picking up every weapon and constantly having to reorganize your inventory, but the reason it's useful is say that you and a PC player are going after the same weapon, you would just run over it and you automatically get it over their scroll wheel. So it helps you compete with even PC players, which is huge. The next setting is preferred item slots, but the thing about preferred item slots is because there's so many different modes in the game, like there's normal battle royale, there's reload, there's creative maps, there's even Fortnite OG, and in most of these modes you're running different loadouts, so basically just set this to wherever your favorite loadout is in your favorite mode. I would say for sure your first slot always needs to be the shotgun, your second slot needs to be an AR or an SMG, and then your other 3 slots are whatever you prefer. Personally, I do 2 consumable items, so like 2 healing items and then a utility item, which is like a movement item. That's what I'm rocking. But now we get down to the building tab. Reset building choice turned on. Disable pre-edits. It's really hard to get good at pre-edits on Nintendo Switch, so I recommend just disabling them. Turbo building obviously on. Auto confirm edits, I always like this set to both. It just makes editing and resetting builds easier. And now this may be controversial, but I think Switch players should use simple edit. Now you're gonna have to let me explain here. Regardless of if you have the best sensitivity in the world, the reason editing on Switch is hard is because of input delay in FPS. Unfortunately on Switch you are limited to only 30 FPS. And what's really worse than that is the input delay, which makes everything so much slower. So even with a pro controller with paddles and all the advantages possible, editing consistently in fast is super hard. Now I'm not saying that it's impossible, because you definitely can do it, but if you come over here, turn on simple edit, turn on tap to simple edit, now you really don't have to worry about the input delay because you don't have to be precise with the squares. You literally just look in a general direction and it edits. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of simple edit, but it's actually so good, especially for Nintendo Switch. If you switch to it for just a day, I think you'd be impressed at how good you can actually get with it. I mean, bro, I can literally full tarp with simple edit on Switch. That is insane. And that's not to mention how much easier it makes box fighting. Like, you Switch players really should be using simple edit. And that's not me calling you guys bad. That's me saying that simple edit is actually good. Now, down below the building section, you get into this extra game options, which I guess turn your FOV all the way up. Tap to search an interact, I like turned on. Energy saving mode, you can set this on whatever you want, but personally, I hate when my stuff shuts off, so I just leave this on never. Over from there is the game UI tab, which is like your reticle, your damage number scales. So this top tab is basically all personal preference. If I was gonna mainly play on Switch, this is probably what I'd run. And then below this for HUD options, the only thing you really need to change over here is net debug stats turned on if you want to see your ping. Otherwise, all of the rest of these, just leave it on default. Over from there is the touch in motion. This is gyro aiming, which this one, if you're on Nintendo Switch, is very interesting because it's the only time I recommend turning it on. However, that's only if you use the default Switch controller that looks like this. Because you're so limited by that controller, the sticks are so tiny. Everything about that controller makes it pretty hard to be good on. So specifically for that controller, I do recommend turn gyro aiming on. But in any other situation where you're plugging in your controller, either you dock your Switch or you just connect a controller like this via Bluetooth. In all of those situations, I recommend turning gyro aiming off as it's only gonna hurt you. Now, one over from there is finally where we get to the controller sensitivity. And this tab is interesting specifically for Switch players because typically when players make best controller settings videos, those best controller settings work for all consoles and all PC players. But I would say in general, those settings do not work for Switch players. With Nintendo Switch's low FPS and high input delay, it makes settings feel way faster than they actually are and makes settings really hard to control. So I start with a 0.075 slide hold time. Recent camera accents, recent camera pitch, these only matter if you use gyro aiming, but either way, I just leave them on default if you do use gyro aiming. Vibrations, if you want the best aim possible, you have to keep this turned off. Quick weapon, we're not going to use that. We're just going to use the default bumpers to switch weapons. We're going to come down to use advanced options. Make sure this setting is turned on. Then we're going to set build multiplier and edit multiplier, both of these to 1.7x. First person mode, just leave it at 1.0. Down to look sense, we're going to go 35% on both look horizontal and look vertical speed with a 2% turning boost on both of those. So if you watch any of my other controller settings videos, you'll already notice that these settings are way slower compared to the ones that I use on PC. But on Switch, they still feel just as fast. And honestly, these might still be too fast for you, especially if you're on the default controller. So for everybody, I would recommend just setting these as your settings right now and then going into a map like my free build map and just basically building around for about 10 minutes to see if you can get used to it. Like on this controller in my setup, this sensitivity and everything is absolutely perfect. But if you come into this map and it's too slow or too fast, then all you have to do is make slight adjustments, like only change this by 0.1 or 0.2 and then test everything again. So if you want your look speed to be faster, come in here, turn this up by like 2 and then test it again because small changes make a big difference. Now down below that is the ADS sense, which again, this ADS sense is insanely slow looking, but it's not actually slow. It's 4% of horizontal, 6% of vertical with a 1% turning boost. And on this, I'd actually turn my scope speed multiplier up to 1.25. And again, all you have to do to test this is come into this map, just ADS, kind of look around, see if it feels too slow, too fast. Nintendo Switch has really strong aim assist, so basically we want a sense where we can get close enough to a player and then start shooting and have aim assist kind of do the rest. And again, if you come in here and test this and it feels too slow or too fast, then adjust it by like 0.1, 0.2, and then come back in and try it again. Because every player is slightly different, but for me personally, these are the exact settings that I use. I use them on a look input curve of linear, which this is actually very important. These settings won't work on exponential, they'll just feel way too weird. So make sure you have this set to linear. Change your aim assist strength all the way up. For some reason, some people turn this down to like 90. No, we want 100%. And then on dead zones, I go 8% on both left and right stick, but this can vary depending on if you have stick drift or not. So this kind of depend on your specific controller. As for your binds completely depend on, once again, if you use a controller like this, a proper pro controller, or the standard controller. So like when I play with paddles, I sprint with a paddle, I jump with a paddle, I pull out my pickaxe with a paddle, and I edit builds with a paddle. That means that's 4 binds where I can do actions without actually moving my thumbs off the sticks, which is hugely important. And then I've crouched on my right stick and I pull out my builds with my left stick. This change alone makes me way better than I could ever be on a standard controller. So that's why I always recommend that players try to get a proper pro controller. So give them a shot, make sure to subscribe if this video helped you, consider watching another one, and thanks so much for watching.